Hello and welcome to episode 3, series 1 for Flicks Through Time. I'm your host as always, TW Norwich, and today we have a wonderful episode about, well, things done a little bit differently, shall we say. How many movies have there been where men dress up as women? I don't know, we're talking about 3 of them today. My guest, Kate, was, she's a bit of a veteran of the show now. This will be her second appearance after the pilot series, and she's got some really fantastic views, and I'm really keen for you to hear them. A couple of quick things before we get into it. As always, a mention to my top-tier Patreon followers. Sean, thank you very much for your continued support. Thank you very, very much. Anyone else, whether you are, if you're on Patreon, even if you're a free member, it's fantastic just to have people listening. The other announcement is I just want you to know that there's going to be a hiatus after this episode. I don't want to rush the series and get it done just so it's done in a timely manner. I'd rather take a pause because I'm hoping for another person, another guest, another new guest, hopefully. I've got a few possible people that might get involved. The problem, of course, is that people have their own lives and it's more important than a podcast. So I do have another episode already recorded, plus another half episode, which, well, that'll make sense later when you hear it, but I want to wait a little while. Does that mean nothing's coming out? No, there will be something else. I've got the new show starting very soon, hopefully next month, which is going to be all about short form videos, me talking about one film at a time. More on that later. That show will be free, however there will be one show behind a paywall, just as a little bonus that I mentioned at the start of the last episode that's coming out very soon. What Makes You Tick, the bonus material which will be available for people on the top 2 levels of Patreon. But as always, this podcast and my spin-off standalone short form show will always be free. So enjoy the show and spoilers ahead. How about a sweater for his dog with Nate's face?
100%. You can do that. I have seen that, and I'm very tempted to get one for Gretel.
And then the reverse, so then he has the sweater with his dog's face.
100%.
And then that's a perfect matching set.
100%. And then someone takes a photo of that, and then they put it on something else, and the meta continues.
What a great way to start the episode. We are currently recording, by
Excellent.
the way.
Excellent. No problem at all.
Kate, welcome back. We are officially in season 1, the last time we were in the pilot episode, so thank you very much for returning to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. And can I just say, it's been wonderful to see such a positive response online from people. In fact, I've had people reach out to me going, hey, check out this director and whatnot. So in future reference, what's the best way to get in contact with us and, share the praise, obviously, but any tips, suggestions, or films that we should put on our agenda?
So if people have any feedback or just want to have a general conversation, I'm in the process of making sure everything online has comments enabled, and for some reason, sometimes it's disabled to start with. I think it's all up and running now on YouTube and Patreon. People should be able to comment there, but I also have the email linked, so people click around on either YouTube or Patreon. There should be all the information there. And a great way to stay in touch is to you can just become a member on Patreon, and that can be free. There are free options, and I'm going to make sure that the main show, the thing we're doing right now, won't be hidden behind a paywall. So
fantastic.
You don't need to give money, and that's a way to keep getting updates. And if I ever reach out to members, I can say, hey, members, including free members, what's happening?
Nice.
And so there's plenty of ways to communicate.
Excellent. Are we also accepting carrier pigeons?
We can. They're not always trustworthy or not always accurate, I should say. Trustworthy, yes. Perhaps not accurate.
I don't know. I mean, look, they love a good war. So,
they do.
Maybe we need to kind of do a fake one. What is that film, Wag the Dog, where they make up a fantastic fake war in order to distract the press from some presidency number? That should be on our list.
Now, that's interesting because I was actually going to bring that up tangentially because there happens to be a certain actor in that film that's also in one of the films we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Sorry, I have jumped the gun.
You have?
I have. Please.
This is so much to say.
I know, darling. Go.
So, the topic is we're going to discuss every single film ever where there's a man dressed as a woman. No, not really. We're going to focus on a few because, and specifically comedies, they tend to be comedies anyway, not always, but as always we talk about across time. So we've got some from different generations and different I mean, there's a lot of similarities, as we'll get into, I'm sure, but they all do things slightly differently as well.
And if you don't call this episode, Man, I Feel Like a Woman, I'm going to be heartbroken.
I just watched a documentary on Netflix about Shania Twain too.
She's a goddess. Happy to have her on as a guest at any point in time.
I will try to fit her into one of the episodes, as long as she can talk something to the film.
Look, anything would impress me much with that one.
I see what you did there.
Thank you.
So the concept, so comedies, men dressing as women, and oh dear, things tend to get out of control as a broad
Absolutely.
structure.
And I think it's really important as well to our listeners that we did take into account, yes, it is white, cis men dressing as women. So it's cross-dressing, it's not transgender, it's not drag. Okay, drag itself is its own amazing art form. There's been some fantastic transgender films over the last 10 years or so. But no, these are basically white straight guys who have to dress as women for a particular reason.
Yeah, because we did talk about all the possible subgenres and we said, no, let's focus on these, otherwise this episode will go on forever. So I I liked this term that I've becoming more familiar with as I'm reading more about film history, and that the term screwball comedy, which I'd heard but not paid much attention to, and just by reading things from the 30s and 40s, that term came up so much, and I didn't actually know specifically what it meant until I started to go, and here's all the examples of them. But I didn't realize it really came out during the Depression era. So the idea that you have usually it's either a romantic story or there's some kind of romantic thing linked in there, and then you perhaps satirize it or you turn it on its head, you do something a bit wacky with it, and these I think we can say probably will fall into that category because there are romantic connections. That's not necessarily what kicks things off, but it is a part of it.
100%.
And they definitely do something a little different, I think it's fair to say.
That's true. Yeah, look, all of these characters, all of these male characters who end up dressing as women, oh my goodness gracious me, yeah, there are romantic interests where it gets super duper confusing at times and whatnot, and how everything sort of comes out in the wash. Yeah, because fascinating.
As you said before, they feel that they have to for a range of reasons. So they have to find themselves in a situation. They don't want to do it. Generally speaking, I think I can speak for all the main characters when most of them actually start to enjoy it a little bit as they go. Not all, though.
But they also discover the pitfalls of being a woman as well. And that is really, really layered, and I know we'll get into that as
Absolutely.
each film.
Let's dive into them. I will just mention an honourable mention as we go through. From 1938, there's a film called Bringing Up Baby, written for Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant's
it's
also
one of my favourites.
Yeah, sadly it's on my list and I didn't get to see it before now. So I just want to mention that because it feels like it really set the stage for this sort of thing. It wasn't the first screwball comedy or anything, but it feels like they really set the template, shall we say.
Absolutely. It's a classic. It's super fun, and you can tell they're having a great time as well, and that is awesome.
I read an interesting one. They were going over budget, apparently, because the two leads kept cracking up laughing so much.
That's great.
That's
what
a good
an
reason.
Awesome job, right?
Yeah, that's a good sign when you're delayed for that reason. But no, we're jumping ahead a little bit further. 1950s.
Yes.
Some Like It Hot, directed by Billy Wilder. You have said, I really like this film, but you said it's one of your all-time favourites. So can you give us a bit of a plot summary and your feelings about the film, please?
Absolutely. This is in my top 5 listeners of all time. I love it. I watch it every year. I have a framed poster in my home. It's wonderful. Okay, 2 dodgy musicians played by the lovely Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon are always after $1. It's set during Prohibition and they're playing at a speakeasy. They get raided. They're looking for work, etc. Can't seem to find it. And then they get a job. They're like, awesome. They borrow a girlfriend's car as it's getting filled up. These gangsters are playing cards, but sadly another group come in and go, hey, you turned me in, kills them all. So they've witnessed this, now they're in trouble. They find out that there is a need for a saxophone player and a bass player for a particular band that just happens to be going to Florida for 3 weeks.
However,
It turns out that it's an all-girl band. So they decide, right, in order to keep themselves safe from this this group, these mobsters, that they dress up as women, get on the train, join the band, and play in Florida.
And it's a perfect sort of connection there, isn't it? Because they need the money, but they need to get out and they need to be safe. And all you need is that one little tweak in the script there, and away it goes.
Absolutely. And it's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant how the scripting is fantastic.
Yeah, what makes it work? What's the ingredients here?
Okay, I think the script, the actors, the whole premise is just ridiculous, and it gets pulled off. That's the wonderful thing. Great music, beautifully shot by Billy Wilder. I mean, it's a win-win. It doesn't matter what your sense of humor is, you will definitely get lots of chuckles out of this one.
Yeah, and the thing that I really enjoyed about it, so I only saw it for the first time maybe a year ago, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I forced you to watch it, yeah.
Yes, that sounds about right. And I absolutely loved it, and I'd done it in reverse order pretty much, or very jumbled order based on the films that we're about to talk about. But I think the performance from the leads really made a spectacular difference here.
And by the way, because of the cross-dressing, this film was banned in Kansas when it was released.
Of course it was.
I know. Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore, that's for sure here. They basically said the cross-dressing is too much, our audiences are not ready for it, and but the rest of America, I believe, was. So that's quite interesting that they went, oh, this is slightly scandalous for the time.
Especially that late. I mean, I'd imagine in the 30s because by the early 30s, by 33, I think, the codes came in about what you can't, the decency codes and all that sort of stuff. So I could definitely see, because it was very heavy-handed. But by the 50s, 60s, it was really starting to relax. But then again, there's always banned films.
100%. And I think, Tony Curtis makes a gorgeous woman, okay?
Yeah.
Jack Lemmon is something else, that's for sure.
He's a riot. Every time he's on...
he just steals the scene. And, getting back to this idea of, laws with regards to what you can and cannot put on screen at the time is that Marilyn Monroe, who plays, the main love interest, etc., is in some pretty scandalous sort of clothing that she nearly falls out of. But the boys, dressed as women, are very quite conservative, but still really well put together. I read last night that the reason why Jack Lemmon's character is, bounding along and whatnot, where has more of a masculine kind of feel, is that he had no problems playing a woman. And you can tell he's having the best time in that scene on the beach where they're throwing the ball at each other, and whatnot. It's wonderful. And Tony Curtis was really scared of playing a woman and doing it justice, and he was a little bit more uptight, hence why she comes as more together and feminine.
Wow. What an interesting combination. I never thought... So by being more confident, Jack Lemmon appeared more masculine.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's even commented on by Sugar Cane, who is played by Marilyn Monroe, who says, wow, I had no idea, Daphne, what a big girl you are. And she says, oh, you should have seen me before the diet. It's just absolutely wonderful, but yet beautiful.
Yeah. It sounds like they got all the ingredients right, as all films do. You can't just have good leads or good script. You need it all.
Absolutely.
And in a comedy, it's so critical. But, yeah, no, I agree. They absolutely nailed it. I'd like to move on, if you don't mind, to the next, I guess, generation. We're talking another 20-odd years. We hit 1982. What a year for film that was. But of all things, a comedy such as this, striking it in the midst of the post-Star Wars sci-fi and adventure film extravaganza. Here we have Tootsie, Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if I may, just for a moment, I want to talk about how I got into this film. I got into it through cultural osmosis because I saw the next film we're going to talk about first, which probably, I dare say, listeners might have guessed if they're at least from roughly our vintage anyway or more. And they'd say, oh, it's just like Tootsie. And I said, oh, what are you talking about? Yep. And then I started to see more, and the famous scene where Dustin Hoffman's saying, taxi, taxi, taxi.
Yep.
Stewie Griffin from Family Guy does that. And when I saw that, I mean, this is how long ago it was, is when I was still watching Family Guy, 20 years ago maybe.
We'll forgive you.
Yeah, I got better. when I saw that scene, I knew what it was referencing. So obviously, it's around. I knew
culturally, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And so much fun. I mean, he says right at the beginning, as Michael Dorsey, Dustin Hoffman, he goes, playing the opposite sex is one of the hardest acting challenges you could have. And he's 100% right. There are these things that we do as men and women automatically that we don't even think about, that have masculine or feminine, with quotation marks there, ideals behind them. And it is tough to pull off in a convincing manner.
Yeah, and that's the trick is, of course, all of these films are about these characters that are successfully doing this.
Yes.
That's the key point. Then people aren't looking at them saying, that's a man in a dress.
No.
They're saying, for various reasons. And I guess that's a good point. We'll get into the plot here.
And by the way, in Some Like It Hot and Tootsie, these men dressed as women are so convincing and so beautiful that they receive a lot of unwanted attention. For example, I believe that Daphne, aka Jack Lemmon, in Some Like It Hot, he ends up getting pinched on the bottom in the elevator. Tony Curtis's character keeps being hit on by the bellboy.
Yep.
Tootsie gets French kissed on set by the tongue kind of thing.
And also gets a marriage proposal.
Oh, yes, he does get a yeah. Well, so does Jack Lemmon's character.
Yeah, that's true. So there's a common thread here, isn't it? They're so convincing. And the films could have gone with revulsion, because then there's the homosexual implication, and they don't go there.
No, and what's interesting is that in Some Like It Hot, fantastic scene where Jack Lemmon has been dancing the night away with the sugar daddy who has, picked him up, and he's got his maracas and dancing and whatnot. And he says to Tony Curtis's character, "I'm engaged. Oh, who's the lucky girl? Me." And then, he's going, "No, you can't do this, mate. You can't do this. There are laws, there's conventions, etc." Why would a guy marry a guy? And without missing a beat, Jack Lemmon's character goes, "Security." Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Such good writing.
It is
so
fantastic.
good.
And every time I watch it, I find more amazing dialogue or spot different Easter eggs. And I'm like, this is just so good.
It reminds me very much of when we talked in our last episode, His Girl Friday, and they're definitely not the same films, but they are channeling that same sort of energy, that fast, quick wit.
Absolutely. And if you're not paying attention, you miss out big time.
Oh yeah, I think I'll have to rewatch it. So quick plot overview of Tootsie. We have an actor who's difficult to work with, and he's not successful as a result, and he gets to the point where he's told no one will work with you.
Yeah.
Snap cut, walking down the street dressed as the titular character.
Yes, Dorothy Michaels is what he chooses to go as, and is successful during an audition and becomes a regular on a soap called Southwest General, and is so influential that his contract gets extended.
Gets a pay rise.
He ends up on the front page of People magazine. I love that montage where he's getting photographed.
And he's freaking out because he's like, I can't keep this up forever. This is driving me mad. He's trying to keep it secret from his girlfriend, and obviously things aren't going well there, and there's a complicated relationship. And then he ends up falling for one of the actors there, a young woman he works with, co-star, thank you, but of course she just sees the woman, and then that all becomes awkward. And then it's her father who proposes to Dustin Hoffman in a dress.
There's this wonderful scene where Dustin Hoffman is sitting with Bill Murray in their apartment, both actors, playwrights, and he's just speaking about the dilemma that he's in, going, so she thinks that I'm cheating with another woman. She thinks I'm a lesbian, no, it's wonderfully written.
Yeah, and special mention, Bill Murray. So we're talking him not quite at the height of his powers, but still quite successful by this stage. So this is pre-Ghostbusters, though. So he's probably not super mainstream, but definitely known for sure. And he's a lot more subdued here because he is playing a supporting role. Does it really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, he didn't even want to be credited. He was like,
"Oh, really?
Yeah."
Oh, there you go. I remember he ended up. I do like that I don't know if it's that scene, but another one where he's like, Dustin Hoffman saying, don't pick up the phone because it might be Sandy, might be this. Oh, but what if it's me? What if it's, I'll get an answering service. It's too complicated. So he's like, fine. So Bill Murray says, I'll go to my girlfrient's place because at least I'm there then. She doesn't have to know.
Yeah.
And it just exemplifies how chaotic their life has become, of course.
Absolutely. And, it has become chaotic because they're having to play a woman a completely different role with a completely different life. It is the ultimate walking in someone else's shoes, or dare I say high heels, specifically here. Oh, that wonderful entry scene where we see Daphne and Geraldine, aka Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis, walking to the train with their instruments, the bow fiddle and the saxophone, desperately trying to figure out how to use these heels. And then watching these other women go past, and they're just amazed that they can do all of this.
How is this possible? You don't have that equivalent scene in Tootsie. He does stumble as he's first doing it, so they do show a bit of progress.
But then, so there is empathy in how difficult it is to be a woman, how much high maintenance there is, and the fact that you are never really safe. But in that, and then we don't miss a beat by seeing Marilyn Monroe walk past, and obviously she's a very gorgeous woman and whatnot, and they do a close-up of her back legs and her butt, and Jack Lemmon's character goes, how does she do it? It's like Jell-O on springs.
I love it. I love it when they embrace these new roles effectively.
Oh, look, the wonderful tips that they share with the girls on the train and all the rest. It's, in fact, Daphne loves playing it up. Josephine, a.k.a. Tony Curtis, is like, pull it in a bit. This is a bit ridiculous.
I do, just to change gears rather suddenly, because there is in Tootsie, there is a very confronting scene. You talk about it underlines the challenges of them suddenly being a woman. So there's the sexual harassment from the tongue. I can't remember what the character's name actually is, but he's basically, I love the line, he's basically a has-been, but then he replies,
you have to have been someone.
First. He's like, right. But then he basically attacks
Tootsie.
her / him. Yes. And it, in the end, Bill Murray's character comes in and basically says, what was going on. And it's played for laughs.
Yes.
But then Dustin Hoffman says the line, because now they're now by themselves, so he can take the wig off, and he says, rape isn't funny.
No.
And that is a really powerful moment, because that line isn't there to be funny, or at least that's not how I read it.
No.
And I don't think in the context it was either. In 1982, the scene is played out to be funny, but then he managed, because he doesn't realise he's going after actually a man. That's the joke. Got it.
Yeah.
But he's really forceful. It's quite
intense and scary. Yeah.
And he says something like, if you didn't show up, referring now to Bill Murray, if you didn't show up, I would have been in the papers, I think. Some words to that effect. And it could have, Bill could have said a funny line, but instead Dustin Hoffman says, rape isn't funny.
No.
And you just go, wow. And I think
and this isn't a comedy.
Yeah. And I think that's the only moment. There's a lot of subtext there about the difficulties he goes through, especially the sexual harassment and the way he stands up. And here's an interesting point I'd like to bring up. The idea that all of the women at work are having this issue, but it takes a man in a dress to stand up on their behalf.
Absolutely. And it turns out that Dorothy Michaels becomes a feminist icon, okay? In the sense that, even his agent, who knows that, he's doing this role, etc., is like, my receptionist wants to be her. Like, this is insane.
Yeah, so the men, of course, are going, wait, this isn't good, because they're sensing a power shift.
Which is interesting. So with Some Like It Hot, both of the men dressed as women are seen as sexually attractive, beautiful, desirable. However, in Tootsie, not so much. They've got the production manager going, okay, guys, and the cameras, can you do us a favor and pull back? They're like, how far? Cleveland? And I'm like, oh.
And they do reference he says, I have to wear heavy makeup because of a moustache issue.
Absolutely.
But the character is an older, or like middle-aged woman rather than a
younger one. Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is, I guess he probably thought he was going to be safer and all the rest, but not the case.
No. As he very quickly discovers. I want to mention a couple of things quickly on Tootsie. before we move on to our third film. I loved the scene. One of my favourite scenes was when he does the big reveal on camera, which is just an incredible scene. You see that the men that were interested in her/him go, what?
I'm sorry, but does Jeff know, coming from the tongue at the end of that scene is just wonderful.
Brilliant scene. The tension building up, and comedy's all about that tension and release. So good. And the thing that I love, the follow-up to that, is then when he then goes to, if I remember the characters' names, it would be better, but he, as we said before, he's in love with a colleague. Julie, thank you. Her father proposes.
That's right.
Right. So then he has a scene where he now goes in dressed just as himself as Dustin Hoffman, not in a dress, sits down next to Julie's father, who doesn't recognise him.
Yeah.
But then he puts down the engagement ring, and then they just have this quiet scene, and they're drinking beer, and he's just like, you can see Dustin Hoffman going, am I going to get hit here or what? But then they have a kind of touching sort of moment where he's just like, yeah, it's all right, and it could have been, again, because he's feeling, I was made a fool and I was actually attracted to a man in a dress, but again, it didn't go for the let's play that bit up for comedy or the factor. It's not there. None of it.
He's angry.
It's the 1980s.
Yeah.
They absolutely could have gone there and they didn't. Other films in the 80s did and they didn't here.
100%.
And it's a sweet little scene.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the fact that he does push the engagement ring back and says, outside.
Yeah.
Can I buy you a beer? Absolutely. Sort of thing.
Yeah, as in give me the ring later. Not let's go outside for a fight, but give me the ring outside where it's less obvious.
Absolutely, and that could have gone terribly pear-shaped for Michael Dorsey, but he's very, very lucky that it doesn't.
But the character, as a character, he had the courage to show up and talk to him and all the rest of it. So it has some redeeming qualities. But I find the thing that both those films do really well, and I'd argue probably better in Tootsie, I guess, is really ram home the difficulties and the lessons they learn in being women. Because in the soap opera, as you said, the sexual harassment, getting chased by the men, the challenges, the pressure, I've got to be dressed, I've got to do this, and I've got to be ready for this photo shoot now and all this sort of stuff. It seemed to drive that point home more so than I think Some Like It Hot did.
Absolutely. And, things I learn is it's a lot of work to be a woman. So in the sense of if you are going to meet stereotypical societal standards where, you've got perfect makeup, a dress, etc., you present yourself really well, that's exhausting and takes a lot of time, energy, and effort. I think they also learn that it's still incredibly unsafe to be a woman.
Especially in Tootsie.
Absolutely. And also that they don't want to be women either. Even when Jack Lemmon's character is shaking his maracas and whatnot, he kind of goes, which leads us to the best line. The best last line ever.
Should we
spoil
it? Spoilers. I know it's like 70 years old. Should we spoil it?
Oh, but it's so wonderful. Look, if you haven't seen Some Like It Hot, it's my recommendation of the year.
Yeah.
You will love it. There's so much to learn. We didn't even talk about the side plot where Tony Curtis's character pretends to be a millionaire.
Oh,
okay?
Gee, yeah, that's right.
And, sweet Marilyn off his feet. So he is playing this millionaire as well as this woman, Josephine, the sax player in the band, as well as himself, just a guy on the run from the mob.
Yeah.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's definitely the highlight. The third part to this trilogy, this discussion, we best move on. And I was a little surprised by this. I did a recent rewatch, but I'll get to that in a moment. So I saw Mrs. Doubtfire. I'm sure probably everyone picked that. Chris Columbus, the director. What a name, by the way, Chris Columbus.
I know.
Yeah. Wonder if he goes sailing very often. Mrs. Doubtfire. So we saw it on the big screen. I remember this came out at about the same time as Sister Act with Whoopi Goldberg and Sister Act 2 and that. And we all went to see Mrs. Doubtfire. And I remember at the time being a little bored, because pretty young at the time, and the parents, the adults going, there's a lot of drama, family drama stuff. And upon rewatching it, I would say that's one big difference between them. So I'll quickly do the plot summary, and I really want to compare it to Tootsie because there is a lot of similarities.
Absolutely.
And there's some stuff that works better in the one than the other. But basically, Robin Williams is a bit too carefree.
Yeah, he's a man-child.
Yes, that's
His character is a man-child.
Yes. That's an apt description. His character can't hold down a job, very immature. His wife leaves him. He's desperate to be with his kids, which is really the heart of it. He wants to be back with his wife, but his kids, he loves his kids dearly. And that's one thing nobody faults him for. He's a great dad, lousy husband.
Absolutely, and a really talented voice actor
as
well. So that's his bread and butter, that's how he makes a job. But of course, he can be a bit difficult to work with. Yes.
And so he says, in very contrived fashion, his soon-to-be ex-wife, because they're just about to get divorced, is saying, I need help because I don't get home in time, so I need someone at home. So he sabotages her ad, changes the number.
Yes.
Back in the days where you took physical pieces of paper to the newspaper, so then...
And some of our younger listeners might not know what a newspaper is.
It's like the internet, but it's printed on dead trees.
Yeah, Google it, okay? And respect your elders. We did high school and university without Google, okay? Yeah, yes, I know.
How did we survive?
I don't know.
Not very well.
No.
It explains all the grey hairs. But, so he sabotages the ad so that he can turn up as Mrs. Doubtfire, therefore be close to his kids. And that's really the conceit. So again, he doesn't want to have to do this, but it's interesting that the first thing he thinks of is like, how do I get this? Oh, I'll dress as a Scottish woman.
Oh, well, and that's super safe. She'll never expect that. And one of my favourite scenes, once again, I'm a sucker for a good montage, is when he shows up to his brother's house, who's his camp as a row of tents. And he's wonderful, played by the lovely Harvey Fierstein, humongous fan. And he's a makeup artist, and they go through the different levels, and they're like, we've got to go full plaster. And away they go. Fun fact, it took 4 hours to get him into makeup as Mrs. Doubtfire, and before shooting began, he'd go and would go around San Francisco and whatnot in character.
Yeah, again, very, very convincing and very different type of woman that he's trying to play compared to the other films, but very convincing.
Absolutely, and a lot older. In fact, his brother says, if we go any older, you'll be mom.
And he does have that argument on the phone with his mum earlier, or by proxy, an argument. So there is some reference to the perhaps dissatisfied.
A lot of improvisation as well throughout this film, which is
it's Robin Williams. It's Robin Williams.
And I think they shot on 3 different cameras here.
Oh, right.
Because they kind of went, let's try and do this as a bit of a doco situation because we just don't know what we're going to get. So, for example, the scene where he has to be himself, Dad, and Mrs. Doubtfire when the social worker comes to visit. He runs out of options and ends up putting his face into a cake, all right, to, disguise himself. It turns out the heat from the lights was so much that it was melting. So he's dropping it into the teacups and improvising.
Yeah, you can. I remember he's whoops. Oh, sorry. But, that. Hello, dear. That was in the trailer. That was the big shot with the what do you call it? The face mask
Absolutely.
cake. Yeah. So I would like to, I guess. 2 things. One, I want to talk about a key difference between Tootsie and Mrs. Doubtfire that I noticed, and then I'd like to talk about basically what makes them all work in their own separate ways, and which ones work better as a result. Mm-hmm. The thing that I noticed of difference was, Tootsie and Mrs. Doubtfire both go for about 2 hours, just shy of 2 hours, which is potentially a bit long for a comedy, but it depends. Mm. But Tootsie, I noticed what was interesting was there's this really interesting cut where it shows him with his with Sandy, I believe, going to the audition, helping her with the audition, which ultimately he gets dressed as a woman, and so we get that he knows the part because he helped her with the role,
the preparation, the
preparation. But then he suddenly goes, "Oh, I got to go see my agent." Talks to him and is told, "No one will work with you." Bang! Suddenly he's in the dress, and I just go, "Whoa!" My head sort of snapped back at how quickly he went from "I can't work" to "I'm in a dress," and it goes very, very fast.
I think right at the beginning of the film, as the credits are starting to roll and whatnot, we see him though prep with regards to makeup and wigs and things like that.
That's true.
Etc. So we know that he's an actor. We know that he has these particular skills.
Yes.
We see it when he is successful at the audition, he's shaving his legs, he's up at the
Yeah.
crack of dawn, desperately trying to, put things together. I can only do my own makeup. I get an allergic reaction,
Yeah.
putting people at a distance. But if you weren't paying attention, you might be like, what is this about?
Yeah, I mean, my guess is I reckon there were more scenes to show the transition to him making that choice. And then I think they looked at a maybe slightly over 2-hour runtime and said, we need to make a cut somewhere. And they realised that everything with him, once he's made the decision to change and to adopt the character, is gold. Don't cut that. So they just went back here. Let's get him in the dress faster. And he gets into the dress quite quickly. By contrast, it takes a half an hour before Robin Williams' character decides to even change the ad. So after half an hour, you still haven't seen Mrs. Doubtfire in Mrs. Doubtfire.
That's
So it
interesting.
really sets up the family drama, which, if it's a family drama with some funny bits in it, is good. But I would argue that when you're trying to make a comedy, it does take a little bit longer. I think it does take too long. The build-up and the pathos that it does, I think, is fantastic. And seeing it as a kid was like, but now as someone who's a bit more age-appropriate and understanding being away from one's children and so on, it's definitely, it is. Those scenes are really heartbreaking. So I can understand why it was challenging. But the thing was billed as a comedy. It's Robin Williams in the 90s. Of course, it's a comedy. And I'd say that's the only reason why I would rate Tootsie higher. I think despite it feels a little bit suddenly cut to get him in the dress, but I think that works in the film's favour. Ultimately, it's just a momentary, how did we get here? It's fine, carry on. The pacing of the film is so good, it doesn't feel like a 2-hour movie.
No, absolutely. I mean, how long is Some Like It Hot, by the way?
That's a great question. Let me do some on-the-fly research.
Because I rewatched it last night and it went by in a heartbeat.
2 hours.
Really?
It's 2 hours, and that's a good sign, isn't it? Because Mrs. Doubtfire is the only one. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still really like Mrs. Doubtfire, but Mrs. Doubtfire was the only film where I felt the length of it. The other two, not at all.
Interesting. I think because Mrs. Doubtfire is such a risk, okay? He's got his kids on the line. We know the marriage is in trouble and all the rest. That's fallen apart, but, the kids, he's got to get it right.
Yes.
Because if the mask metaphorically or literally is pulled off too soon, he's in a world of pain. Also, another interesting thing with regards to these films is who chooses to reveal themselves. So, for example, Michael Dorsey as Dorothy Michaels, Dustin Hoffman in Tootsie, he decides live on air to come clean with this ridiculous backstory.
Which suits his character, well, his new character, I should say. She's so confident and really takes charge of the situation.
Oh my God, because she's a man. That's why. How does it unravel? I don't want to say too much about Some Like It Hot, but Josephine, aka Tony Curtis, goes up to Marilyn Monroe's character, Sugar Cane, at the end. She's so sad that she's had her heart broken by this so-called millionaire, and in costume kisses her on stage and takes her a moment and goes, oh my God, Josephine is this pretend millionaire, and goes after him. Fantastic chase sequence at the end. Mrs. Doubtfire, courtesy of a nearly accidental, fatal allergic reaction, ends up revealing. Because if not, he would have gone forever.
Yeah, that's true.
Even with the kids knowing, he'd be like, no.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. It is definitely not his choice, but he chooses, I need to save this person.
I will therefore take the moral high ground, even though I don't like him and he's taking my family away,
he's taking my... now what timing was that? So that was pre-James Bond, Pierce Brosnan.
Yes.
Because that was 93 and GoldenEye was 95. So he would have been cast off the back of... not specifically that, of course. He was doing other things. But
yes, absolutely. And apparently Mrs. Doubtfire is based on a novel, and there were some adjustments made. They said, we didn't want him just to be an outright villain. We wanted Stu to be a nice guy and clearly makes Miranda happy and is great with the kids, which makes it even more heart-wrenching for Daniel, Robin Williams' character. You just go, oh, this is tough.
Yeah, because you either do one of two ways. You either go, he's actually a bad dude, but no one else knows it except me, but I can't reveal it because they'll think I'm just jealous. You can go down that path, which has been done to death. But that's not the point. The point isn't unseating this new suitor, shall we say.
Yes.
The point is about him managing how to get his life back in a weird way.
But, you still can't help but laugh when Mrs. Doubtfire throws a lime at the back of his head at the swimming pool and goes, "It was a run by fruiting!" You can't help but go, hee.
Yeah, and that really comes down to performances, isn't it? I think the thread, for me anyway, I'm interested in your views. The thread is, I would say, all three of these films are very, very good.
Yes.
At least one of them is an all-time classic, I would say. Maybe all three.
I think all three are in
certainly
their own way.
The first two.
Yeah.
Mrs. Doubtfire, quite possibly. You don't get that without a good script, that's true. But I think the through line here is the key performances. The men all the supporting cast too, of course.
Oh, wonderful.
But the men that ultimately take on the dresses, all four of them over the three films, were perfectly cast and did an incredible job. And I think that's what makes them work, because there's been other films that do this sort of thing that don't hang around as long.
I think also they do their own version of femininity as well.
Right.
And that also reflects the zeitgeist in which they were obviously shot in, but it's fascinating, the lads from Some Like It Hot, super young and gorgeous and, getting hit on by young and old men. Tootsie, classic liberal feminist, I'm as good as the boys, etc., going in there, etc., but still not safe. And then we have Robin Williams as Mrs. Doubtfire, this older Scottish lady kind of thing. So very, very, very different versions.
Sort of doing the wisdom thing, like being the older wisdom, offering advice and so on.
100%.
The thing about Some Like It Hot is, you talk about those playing the sexy women kind of thing, and it makes sense. And it feels, it's a 50s movie. But
it's so ahead of its time.
Yeah. But on the other hand, some of the performances are also looking back as well, because, it's set in the 30s. And if you watch films from the 30s, not with men in dresses, but if you watched the equivalent film,
yes,
you would have seen it's those same women. It's like we talked about a couple in our last episode, Dishonored Lady,
yes,
for example. So you've got films from the 40s, and certainly His Girl Friday. Any of those kinds of, you've got the gangster films, you've got the business one, the hardworking people, all that sort of stuff. All those women, they have that look, and that's definitely what they were channeling. So, on the one hand, Some Like It Hot looking ahead for sure, but when it came to the performances, they were clearly looking back at 1930s, 40s female performances and going, "We'll do that."
Absolutely, that's the energy that they wanted to do, and I think it's all said in the title, which is Some Like It Hot. This jazz number, big energy and whatnot, sexy kind of numbers. Absolutely, that's it. And the music is fantastic, and Marilyn Monroe, wonderful.
She's really good in that.
She was so good. A lot of people said, she really struggled with lines and things like that, and when Billy Wilder went print, that was it kind of thing.
Right,
Move
okay.
on.
But it
she
worked.
was marvellous.
Yeah.
She plays dumb exceptionally well, which is really hard, okay? Really, really hard.
It's like a good actor trying to be a bad actor.
Oh, 100%. It's tough. It's like singing out of key. It's a lot harder than what people realise, except for me. According to my dog, no, I am not the next Taylor Swift or Beyonce, which is true, but hurtful nonetheless, okay? I think in the classic words of Ginger Rogers, I did everything he did, only backwards and in heels, is definitely brought to the forefront of all of these characters.
Absolutely. And that's the point that especially the first two films are trying to get across, and I think they just nail it. They absolutely nail it.
Absolutely. And, the challenges of being women in the, as you said, set in the 30s, in the 80s, in the 90s, etc. Sadly, these things haven't changed. But what is interesting now is that we're now seeing more female directors, we're seeing more female producers, we're seeing women finally being given incredible scripts. I'm 40, and a lot of actors say at this age as a woman, what are you going to play? Kind of thing, which is ridiculous because there's so many stories to be told. So I think it's marvellous that these folks have done it unbelievably well. But you know what? In 2025, it's really nice to see women doing their thing on film super successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. What a legacy these films bring.
It's wonderful, and it's fascinating. Watching these male characters transform into these women and the stories and their journeys that they go on. It's just absolutely fascinating. And as I said, I'm sure a lot of women go, oh yeah, that's still a thing today. Yeah, who does want to wear high heels?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I can only assume, of course. But yeah, that's the impression.
That's very disappointing. Next time we do this, I want an update on how your heel work is going. You know the high heels were originally designed for men.
I did not. That doesn't surprise me.
Absolutely. It was literally to kind of lift them out of the poop on the streets and things like that. In fact, just leaping back to our last cast, there's just been research done on Barbie's feet, okay, and high heels and all the rest.
It's not anatomically possible or something?
Absolutely. I'll have to go back into it. But I was like, there you go. And ironically, my best friend, who is 15 years older than me and is a man, can definitely wear heels better than I can. I look like a penguin that's had too much to drink. Okay, it's not a good look. I'm a firm foot girl, boots all the way.
Makes sense to me, but I've never tried heels yet.
There's always a yet, which is exciting. What did Jack Lemmon's character say? Oh my goodness, what if I'm hit on? And Tony Curtis's character goes, what? With those legs?
Perfect. I think that's a good place to leave it. Yes, great summary. I think we can both agree. Recommend all the films.
Oh, 100%.
Especially the first two. I think we can say we're both massive fans of those first two, especially.
Absolutely, all to do with performance.
Yes.
Not just as women, but obviously the musicians, the actor, the other actor, etc., and how challenging it is, and what a brilliant job these men do is absolutely wonderful. And the women, how they respond when they find out that it's not their girlfriend they've been talking to, but someone else, is also really interesting.
It certainly is. Excellent. Kate, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.